Hello, everybody. My name is Fab, and welcome to Star Dregs, where I watch Star Trek and drink. Today, this is episode 1, which I've named Vinareal disease. I'm drinking a nice red wine with this because we're watching The Cage. And, with vintage Star Trek like that, I thought I'd go with some, well, it's not 2018. It's not that vintage, but I thought it was fitting. So let me first explain the concept of this show. I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. I started watching Star Trek, I don't know, when I was about 7, I guess. I was watching TV with my grandmother and stumbled upon Star Trek The Next Generation. Started watching that. Then pretty soon the Borg episode where they capture Captain Picard came on, and I was completely hooked from that point onwards. I've watched pretty much any Star Trek there is. After that I watched, of course, Deep Space Nine, but Voyager was the first show that I watched while, when it came on TV. There was a new Star Trek show, and when it came on TV in Germany, I watched the first episode. I actually put on my Starfleet uniform, and every week, I don't know what day it aired. I think it was Friday night. I would sit down on my parents' couch in the living room in my Starfleet uniform and watch Voyager. And I've watched Star Trek ever since. I'm constantly just watching old episodes. Currently watching Deep Space Nine. I'm just in the amazing Dominion War episodes, just watching that. And so I've watched TNG maybe 5, 6, 7 times through. Deep Space Nine and Voyager almost as much. I've watched TOS through several times, and then of course Enterprise as well. Also watched the new Star Trek, but not let's not mention that for the moment. So what the plan is for this show is that I'll talk about a Star Trek episode each episode, and we'll start at the very beginning, and we'll go through chronologically pretty much. I want to do TOS first, then Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. Let's see how far we get. I'm going to ignore the animated series for now, and I don't know what I'm going to do about the movies. So I don't know how that's going to work out. So the idea is that, the best way would probably, if you watch the episode I'm talking about before you watch this, or you can watch this and watch it afterwards, or you can not watch the episode at all, just watch me rant about and drink and rant about Star Trek. Cheers, by the way. You can do that. I don't give a damn. You do you, all right? So we're going to start. Got my little pad here. We're going to start with The Cage today, which is the pilot of Star Trek, the original Star Trek, the original series. It's written by Gene Roddenberry himself, the man who created Star Trek, and is apparently directed by Robert Butler, which I only learned when researching this. So, the idea is that I'm watching all of Star Trek through, and you're watching with me, and we together gain this in-depth understanding through nitpicking and ranting of Star Trek, right? So I learned things as well. I didn't know this was directed by Robert Butler, who also directed the pilot of Hogan's Heroes, which is a show I really like. And apparently also a few Columbo episodes, which is also stuff I really like. So this was, the original pilot. It was originally in production. It was named The Cage. Then the title changed to The Menagerie. When I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, when they made season 1 episodes 11 and 12, they named that The Menagerie. So this reverted back to The Cage once it was eventually aired. It's a little bit complicated. So this was, as I said, the pilot. It was completed in early 1965, but it was never shown on TV actually until 88. And they didn't really, so they made this pilot, and the pilot wasn't accepted by NBC, and so it kind of disappeared, right? Then they made a new pilot, the episode we're going to watch next, and this really disappeared. They actually cut it up. So the original print, this was filmed and was cut up in editing when they made the Menagerie, so episodes 11 and 12, which is basically later on in the series. They took this, what we're going to see, what you just saw, or see, they took the cage and they cut that up and made like a framing story around it and made it like a 2-part episode later in the series, which is kind of ingenious because they filmed it all, right? And they didn't want to waste it. But that meant that they actually cut up the original print. So they didn't have that anymore. What they had was they had the cut, they had the bits they put in the Menagerie, and the other, the stuff that left on the cutting room floor was gone. But they had a work print of Gene Roddenberry's, which Gene Roddenberry had kept, which is kind of work print, is kind of back in the day, they would shoot during filming so that the before they really edited the thing, so that in the morning the editor could the director and the showrunner could actually look at what had been filmed, and that was black and white back in the day. So there was a version of this they released on WHS before they actually showed it on TV in 1986, because people at Star Trek convention kept bugging Gene Roddenberry about it, and that had like black and white scenes. Then interesting, in 87, some film archivist who was at a Hollywood film lab found the missing trims, so the stuff they had cut out. So they could recover the whole thing, which is the thing you can see now if you watch it on stream service or whatever, or on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. But what they had lost is actually the soundtrack. They didn't have the soundtrack. So the scenes they took that used to be black and white have the soundtrack from Roddenberry's work print, which you can actually tell if you watch this through. There are scenes or like cuts where it has worse audio. There's a lot of noise in there, and that's why that's why that is. There's also one interesting thing. So another interesting thing. So obviously the Telosians all played by women, but they were dubbed by men, which is quite cool, which makes them really alien. It's a pretty good idea. It's pretty cheap back in the day, cheap trick. Pretty cool thing to do. Now, they had a problem though when they re-released this pilot, and showed it on television at some point, right? And they had the problem that before they showed it, they actually, with the Menagerie, this came in, right? So when they cut the Menagerie, the guy who is playing the keeper is Malachi Throne, who later plays Commodore Mendez in the Menagerie as well. So in the framing story, he plays like a Commodore, and he has a very deep, very recognizable voice. So you can kind of tell, or you could have, like from the original version of the cage where they left his voice as it was. If they cut that into the framing story from the Menagerie, you would have known it's the same actor. It's Malachi Throne. So what they actually did is they shifted the voice of the keeper, and that's actually the version you see today. Like when you watch this on streaming services, the Telosian keeper has a very voice, which actually kind of works. I kind of like it. It makes him see. He's the Telosian who talks as most, so you kind of recognize this as like the Telosian voice, and together with it being a woman, and then it kind of makes it even more alien. It's kind of interesting. If you watch this, you kind of notice that there's some. So Desilu, when they produced this, pretty much had to make a lot of stuff up as they went, because this was originally going to be a 90-minute pilot, and the version they filmed is an hour long, and you can already tell like they kind of stretched their budget on that one. So you can tell it was very ambitious at the time, especially for such a small production studio. But it holds up. For all of that, I think it holds up surprisingly well. One thing one does notice, if you ever seen Forbidden Planet, which is a film from '56, if you watch that and then you watch The Cage, it's kind of obvious where Roddenberry got a lot of his ideas. Like a lot of that, like I wouldn't say it's like, it's not the same story. It's not copied or anything, but it's like a definite influence, even more than an influence. It's like, he obviously, I mean, that came out like a few years earlier, and Roddenberry was obviously, this is kind of, I'm kind of structuring this story in the same way. And obviously he had more stories written, because this is just a pilot, right? They just chose this one to be a pilot, which actually didn't work out, because NBC obviously rejected that. They had two major complaints, which was that this was too cerebral, which is actually Robert Butler, the director, when asked about this later on, said he understood this, and he actually agreed with this judgment. And Gene Roddenberry also said, a quote, that he understood it at the time. He said he'd gone too far for television at the time. And I can't judge that. I'm born in the 80s, so I don't know what television was like in the middle of the 60s. But it's very, like, if you, the only other stuff I know from the time really are like crime shows and westerns, and maybe the original Mission Impossible was probably also around that time. And you can tell, it is very cerebral and very high concept for the time, which is, that's the founding of Star Trek. That's why Star Trek became what we all love it to be. That was one complaint. The other complaint was overall eroticism, which I'm also going to talk about in a bit. That was understandable. Interestingly, because of that, Roddenberry originally had the plan when this was rejected, and they said they ordered a second pilot, which, by the way, is very rare in Hollywood. It's rare today, and it was, I think, even rarer in the 60s. It was pretty amazing that they gave him the chance. He was originally gonna do Matt's Women, which has a lot more overt eroticism in it. So that's why that didn't turn out to be the pilot. Some other complaints NBC had was they did not like the idea of a female first officer. I mean, Star Trek has always been pretty progressive, which you can see, here. But then NBC didn't like that, of course. So it was it was changed in the original series. Although I don't even know, is Spock? He's technically the first officer, isn't he? Yeah, I think he's the first officer. I always have Spock down as the science officer, which, I mean, I don't know. He's both, I guess. So, yeah, that was a thing. They didn't like that. And they thought, speaking of Spock, they thought Spock was too alien, which I actually like. I actually don't think he's too alien. He's not alien enough. But we're going to look at that in a little bit when we get into the details here. They also wanted better doctors for the ship, better actors for the ship's doctor, which I actually do agree with, and the yeoman, as well as some other crewmen. Although the yeoman I really like, but we're going to get into that as well. Yeah, and that's pretty much the background. I think it turns out to be a good episode. It has its weak spots, but even... Okay, what is this? I didn't do math. Why didn't I write this down? Is it from 65? So it's like, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years almost, right? Almost 60 years later. It holds up. I'm shit at math. See, this is why I joined ops. That's why I joined the operations division and not the science division, because I'm shit at math. We just use computers for that, by the way, that's my love of Voyager is why this is my preferred uniform, of course. I still think this is the best Starfleet uniform they ever had. But anyway, I think this this episode holds up, or this pilot even holds up quite well. I mean, like the writing, for example, like the storyline and everything is just infinitely better than anything Star Trek has come up with after like Rick Berman left, right? All of the new Star Trek, this is better. And it's quite amazing because if you watch it, you can see the limitations of the sets, of the actors in some cases, especially in Venus' case, I would say. But there's some, I'm going to go into the details, but like there's some, some things that don't really work. But like in general, I think it's a pretty good watch even today. If anybody hasn't seen The Cage, I would recommend it. And with that, let's get into the meat of this episode. Make it so. So let's get into the details. We start off with the intro here. It has the familiar music. The music is already pretty much. It doesn't really have, like, it has a credited sequence, but it's very very short. The main music like really cuts in when they go to warp the first time, which is interesting. But I like that a lot of this looks very much like in the proper scene, which, that was like a year later. They filmed all of that. Interesting, the logo is different. It's more of like a Star Trek the motion picture kind of thing. I kind of like the font. The font's very simplistic. The Starfield effect is shoddy. That has like some weird holes in it, right? And then you have, you do have a little bit of a title sequence. Star Trek created by Gene Roddenberry. Or I don't know if that was usual back in the day to do that, but it feels like he already like wanted to. He knew. I think he knew that. He knew that he had a franchise on that side. He knew that if he could get this ship flying, so to speak, he had something on his hands, right? So. Yeah, so he did that. So interestingly, we then have the ship flying by, and we have this zoom. And I was just, in my notes, I just wrote down, what the fuck is that zoom? It looks shit. It's like, why are they zooming into the ship? Like, you can see in the screenshot, like, how shoddily it's, like, composited. It doesn't really work well. Then we have Spock, who talks, says this was originally not the first episode aired. I said this. This was only aired in the 80s on television, right? But I'm treating this as the first Star Trek on television, even though it technically wasn't, but to me it was. So, had they shown it, it would have been. So we have the first words ever uttered in Star Trek, interestingly said by Spock. Check the circuit. And can't be the screen then, which is a bit rougher on the edges, I think. Spock looks a bit weird. His eyebrows are a bit thick, and he's got like this fluffy hair. What I don't understand is, you can see in that picture there, Major Barrett, number 1, is sitting at the helm, right? I think that's the helm position, if I remember correctly. The other one's the ops position. Why is the first officer, and Spock walks around the bridge. It makes it look like Spock's the first officer. Why is she flying the ship? That doesn't make any sense. Like, even in naval terms, right? The first officer doesn't control the ship. He's got people for that. I like the uniforms. I like that Submariner turtleneck thing they have going on. I really like the Starfleet patch, which traditionally, we're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode, but that is technically not the Starfleet patch yet. Like, that's the Enterprise ship symbol. It's like soon on much better than it is in later TOS. So the episode, the uniforms look much better than in the first episode, I think. Yeah, and one thing I would not extend this to, though, is the trousers. There you can see Spock is acting like the first officer. I feel. like the way he stands and stuff. But okay, maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maybe they changed that around or whatever. I mean, I think Roddenberry knew from the beginning that Major Barrett would have been the first officer, because I mean he was obviously enamored with her. He obviously marries her later on. Major Barrett, in case you don't know, is the lady in the very rightmost here, well, the only lady in that picture, and she is probably best known for playing Deanna Troi on The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and she's also the voice of the computer. She's the LCAS voice, the voice of the Starship Enterprise, which is what I always remember her fondly from. That it's just burned itself into my mind from thousands of hours of watching Star Trek. But if you look at the guy in the back, just look at his trousers. And we see this through all the episodes. They all have, like, the trousers are too short. I mean, Pike has them tucked into his boots, so it doesn't really, you don't really see it so much. But, like, everybody's trousers, no matter if they wear that own uniform or something else, they're all, like, too short. Okay, so they're flying along, and they get hit by something, which is apparently radio waves, which doesn't make any sense. A lot of the science in this science fiction, early science fiction, makes no sense. They're also visible. Like, why would you see radio waves? They're very baffled by this. They figure out it's a distress signal. I don't know why they're so baffled. Apparently, distress signals are made to cause interruption in the ship system. I don't know how that works, if they're radio waves. They do travel at light speed, though. They got that right. But for some reason, you can see them. Like, you can't see anything that travels at light speed, right? But okay. Yeah, so what is most baffling to me about this whole setup, the whole ship, is the fucking stationary. Like, what's with the fucking stationary? If you look in that scene, Pike seems as baffled by this guy handing him a piece of paper, yellow, that it looks like it's from a legal pad. I don't know. He looks as baffled as I am. He also doesn't take it. I don't know what's on there. It's pretty weird. We then see, so Spock pulls up this chart, and we see they actually have hand gesture control for the computers, which is pretty advanced. We only got that in real life, like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I love this chart Spock has. One thing you notice is that Talos 4, which is the planet we're going to, where the distress signal came from, is like at a 90-degree angle to the plane of reference of the solar system, which is pretty cool. Apparently also it's a binary system from the looks of it. That's pretty cool. They talk about M-class planets, so they're already a thing. This is, of course, a famous mistake in Star Trek, because I think they meant star classifications. You know how there's an M-class star, you know, it's K-class, that's all these classes, but they started categorizing planets or moons with these. It's like a rating for in habitability, in case you don't know. So you haven't watched much Star Trek. M-class planet is kind of like Earth-like. So apparently this is an Earth-like planet. Spock is then very disappointed, being all the science officers and everything, that Pike doesn't want to explore. Apparently the Enterprise has been in some fight, and there's some people also, you notice for the whole episode, I've been actually just watched the episode or the pilot before I watched this, and I've seen it several times. But I've never noticed that there are actually a lot of bandaged people around. So that's apparently from the fight. That was the fight on Rigel 7. So we see that. I thought it was very cute that Spock was very disappointed that Pike didn't want to explore this distress signal, because Pike's like, we've got wounded, we have to get to a starbase, we're gonna have to fix the ship and get replacements for people that need to go to the hospital, which is very sensible. Although I feel like in later Star Trek, you trust in your doctor. Maybe he also doesn't like his doctor. Maybe that wasn't only an NBC thing. You'd think that a Constitution class starship, and they talk about that in later episodes, has enough medical facilities, basically almost like a starbase, that you could just care for the people there. And then, it's a distress signal. So normally in later Star Trek, whenever any ship, the Enterprise, even Voyager, gets a distress signal, and Voyager's fucked right there in the middle of nowhere. At some point, I think they get a Federation distress signal. They just drop everything they're doing, and they just go there. So they don't do that yet. I almost said Kirk. Pike just wants to go home, right? And it's also a personal thing, I think. One thing I noticed is that the turbolift at this point is just the wall. There's just a corridor there, really. There's no turbolift. When the bridge door opens, you can see that. That was a neat thing. So Pike goes down to his quarters, and we get this shot of the Enterprise corridors. I think they look different later in the series, right? They built different corridors. I kind of like this design. Who the fuck are these people? So apparently the Enterprise at this point is 204 crew members, which is a lot fewer than it's 430 under Kirk. So, but apparently there's civilians on board. I don't know. Are these guys out of uniform because they're on leave? Are they, do they have free time? Why the hell's the guy wearing sandals on a spaceship? Like, that just, the clothing, is that supposed to be futuristic? That looks very, I'm not so up on I know like formal clothing from the 60s, but not really like what people wore during that. But that looks like what you would wear to the pool or like at a casual party in the 60s, right? Or is it too casual? Like in the 60s, they weren't that casual. I don't know. I was like, what the fuck's going on there? What are these people doing? It's basically what I wrote down here. Right, then we go into Pike's quarters. And there's no wall-mounted communicators. Apparently, he's using his hand communicator to call the doctor to his, cabin. I find it interesting that communicator looks like a later style TOS communicator, but without a case, although it is bigger. I kind of like the look of that. It's very future. That's like in the future, then they don't care about casing, right? They're just, and that looks like a very, like for the 60s, that looks like a very like futuristic circuitry design, I would think. Even if you knew what circuitry looked like in the 60s, it's like almost like integrated. It looks a little bit like the inside of it's like an iPhone without a case. I thought it was pretty cool. It's also quite bigger, if bigger than the later communicators. You got Pike's quarters. Interestingly, I've also noticed this for the first time. There's a hat. He's got like a naval style captain's hat or something sitting there next to the phaser on his TV. That's a very 60s like TV setup. That's supposed to be some kind of screen, right? But it looks very much like a 60s TV. Yeah, I wasn't impressed by the set. The quarters I don't really like. The bed's too short. And this is a theme. Pike is too tall for later he gets into an elevator on the planet in Talos 4, and he's too tall for that. He's too tall for everything. The sets are built for smaller people. Now, Hunter isn't that tall, at least for like, I don't know. He's 183, I think. So I'm 184. That's like where I live in Germany. That's like just normal 6 foot. It's like normal size, right? So he's about 6'0" as well. So he's not really tall, but just look at that bed. Like when they built that set, they didn't actually take into account who would be, if anybody would actually be lying on it. I don't know. That's just weird. So the dog comes in. Apparently Pike needs to relax. He gives him a martini, which looks like it's like a lab like beaker. He mixes that in. Pike also says he's putting ice in that. He obviously doesn't. There's no ice in there. So it turns out Pike's tired. He doesn't want to be captain anymore. The Rigel 7 thing was horrible. He just wants to go home to his mommy or something, to Earth, or he actually considers becoming an Orion slave trader, which is when later. Well, they actually show this. This comes up in this episode, but like that is quite a career change. Starfleet captain to Orion slave trader. They mention specifically green animal women. This is like, if you think sometimes, if you watch like television from 10 to 20 years ago and you think, wow, like people talk differently. There's a lot of like talk about women that you wouldn't talk like that on TV these days, like old fashioned. Like if you watch this from the 60s, it's fucking old fashioned. I mean, green animal women. Jesus. So apparently, where he lives on Earth, which we later learn is Mojave, which is a city now, there is 50 miles of parkland around. 50 fucking miles. Like, what the hell? Earth sounds pretty boring. No wonder he wants to become an Orion slave trader. Does that mean he'd be part of the Orion Syndicate? Does that exist in this time? That'd be an interesting research point. So there's some good writing in here. The doctor says a man. So they're talking about life and about challenges in life and stuff. And the doctor says a man either lives life as it happens to him, meets it head on and licks it, or he turns his back on it and starts to wither away, which is pretty good writing, I think. Licks it is it's like, you can tell that sometimes that this is space western, right? I mean, later they get DeForest Kelly on as well, but like in the first episode, but like or from the first episode, but you can tell, Trek. It has some western influences. Licks it is one of those, I feel. Anyway, Spock comes on the horn and says, "We now have survivors," because apparently there's been another radio wave transmission. The dot matrix printer, I kind of really enjoy that. You can see that there's just somebody just on the other side of the thing just pushing a paper through. But I think it's kind of a dot matrix printer. What I didn't understand is Pike keeps saying, or Spock later on says this as well, he says like address entercraft or intercraft when he goes on the intercom. That's a bit weird. Does that mean he wants shipwide? Probably. And now he says, our destination, so he tells everybody, I mean, they're going there now because they're survivors, so now they have to go there. I don't know. I feel like Star Trek, they have, Starfleet in later Star, they would have gone there anyway, check for survivors. But he says, our destination is the Telos Star Group, our time warp factor 7. And then, you get then he says, engage, and then you get the warp effect, and then the intro music. The warp effect's horrible, by the way. It's just like a star field overlaid over them sitting there. And the guy, you can see his bandaged hand as well. Like the ops guy goes like 7. We're on warp effect. He gives them like numbers because then, there's no audio at this point for the viewer. But presumably they could just talk to each other. I don't get it. Yeah, so apparently this is interesting to me. Obviously, some lore changes after this, and there's some stuff they fucked up. But apparently, warp originally was like a time factor, so it's like a time warp. So because they're traveling faster than light, it warps. I mean, technically it does, but like it's a weird way to say that. If you look at that star field, they show several times. I'm pretty sure that's the Rorschach test. And then we have collision alert. Pike runs into the new yeoman. He's got a new yeoman because the old one got killed. It's this girl. She looks like she's 16. A bit awkward. He runs into her, but she's like, Sir, you wanted the report at 0500. And he was like, all right, I guess I did want the report at 0500. And then she goes away. And now I think my favorite scene of the whole episode, which, goes into the old fashioned talking about women bit. Pike, number one explains that this new yeoman. He's like, yeah, I know. And then she's like, and then he's like, it's just that I can't get used to having a woman on the bridge. And he gets a withering look from Major Roddenberry. She's just like, what the fuck? And he's like, oh, no offense, Lieutenant. You're different, of course. And Major Roddenberry is superb acting. Is like, has like the most dejected look into the camera. Captain Pike, such a charmer. He really knows his way around women. Yeah. The one thing I also noticed, like the techno babble, they don't have that down at all yet. Like it's a bit, that's obviously a big factor on Star Trek. But yeah, we have the guy in Ops scanning the planet and saying, well, at Talos 4 now, and he's scanning the planet. He says, as I read it, so he sees like this stuff. He scans it and he says, as I read it, they polarize out as rounded metal bits. Polarize out rounded metal bits doesn't quite work. Then we're in the transporter room. Really nice jackets, I thought. I like they sparkle. They have like this sparkling effect. Also, they have backpacks, and one guy has an antenna on it. Looks pretty, I don't know, old school sci-fi probably. Interestingly, the transporter effect is already the TOS transporter effect, so which I think the special effects guys, I think that's bubbles in a glass of water. That's pretty cool. I like the planet Talos 4, like the matte painting is pretty awesome. Actually, the whole planet set looks a lot better than some of the planets later in the series, I thought. We have the famous scene with the singing plants, which is probably the most obvious scene where you see that, Leonard Nimoy hasn't, or I guess Roddenberry ended, they haven't figured out Spock yet, right? I don't think he has that much of a backstory at this point. So the non-emotional thing hasn't been established. And if you watch this and you've seen it, this is one of the scenes that doesn't hold up, right? There's a whole time warp thing, and this doesn't hold up because if you know Spock later, I don't know, is he on drugs? I mean, you could probably retcon it that those plants are just drugged or something. And they have some effect on Vulcans. But he's very emotional in this. He's actually laughing. There are scenes where number one is actually the cool, she has some, you can see why Spock's later is first officer. She already has some of the the little bit of the Kirk Spock dynamic is there, except that it's Pike number one, although she isn't in that many scenes with him, but it's the daring, dashing captain and the cool, the emotional captain, right? And the more controlled first officer. So Spock isn't that at this point. So they meet some survivors. Pike says, Captain Christopher Pike, United Spaceship Enterprise. So that's what USS stands for. And the other guy introduces himself. He's from the American Continent Institute. That doesn't really work. And then I think the ops guy, lieutenant, is he lieutenant? Or I don't know. I don't even know what his rank is. You can see on these uniform jackets, they just have one stripe. They're not ranked stripes on there. So who the fuck knows? So apparently warp drive is relatively new. Because he says ships are much faster than 18 years ago when this ship, the SS Columbia, crashed there. And this guy says the time barrier has been broken. This is something that doesn't jibe with later lore at all. There is no time barrier. Obviously, there can't be the light barrier because even this SS Columbia must, even if it's a cryogenic sleeper ship, one of the things that SS would that's what they, Khan traveled in, kind of spaceship, the old style spaceships. Even those are going faster than light, right? Otherwise it would have taken them hundreds of years to get where they're going. Or even, I mean, they must go far. Yeah, they can't even go at a fraction of light. They must go faster than light. So, I mean, this doesn't really, they hadn't worked all of this out, right? They were just doing a pilot at this point. the Federation doesn't exist. They don't know what the Federation is and stuff like that. You don't notice that in this episode, but that comes up later in TOS. I'm sure we're going to talk about this. And then Vina appears. This is why I called it Vinareal disease this episode. Look at those eyes. You know that Deep Space Nine episode, which I recently watched because that's why I remember it, where somebody says about Odo that Odo has bedroom eyes, and like the whole episode's about Odo having bedroom eyes. No. I mean, no offense to Renee Auberjonois, but like those are fucking bad. Let's just look at the way she like tilts her. Like, this is like a study. If you wanted to study as a woman how to like flirt with just your eyes, how to like if you're one of these like flirt guy, the flirt instructors or whatever, those guys with the video games, that's how you would like teach a woman to like, have seductive eyes. That's how you look. Like, I mean, her blue eyes, of course, is one thing, but like the way and the makeup, but the way she fucking just like, Jesus. Like, there's undressing people with your eyes, and then there's fucking this. It's like, jump. That look says jump on me now, which, makes sense. That's the whole idea here, as we will rapidly discover. But I just, that look just made my day. That's just fucking amazing. Yeah. And then he says, as she says, you appear to be a healthy and intelligent captain, prime specimen. I mean, how fucking creepy is that? How freaky can you fucking be? And then the guy tries to excuse, she's been living with old elderly scientists for all her life. Like, no. Like, even then, you wouldn't be like this sex hungry and fucking creepy. I mean, she's hot as hell, but she's like her looks are like, I'm gonna stay here with you. If I'm like, Kirk would have been on her. Like, Pike has actual self-control, right? Kirk would have been on her like from the first minute. So we're lucky we have, and he would have been stuck on that planet, I think. Kirk wouldn't have gotten off this planet. Especially when we get into the foursome situation. Kirk would have been just fucking stayed there and forgotten about the Enterprise. Pike has self-control, right? But like, when you just see her, you're like, I'm done with this, I'm gonna stay here. But then anything she says, so fucking creepy that you have to have like red alert going on in your head. Like, you don't wanna like this. No. It's just everything she says is just like a huge signal to just back away slowly. Like, I don't know what she does to men after sex, eat them or something. That's like the vibe you get. It's like fucking creepy. I also like how the old man call her the girl. I don't know. She's supposed to be like in her 20s, I think. That actress is 32. I mean, she looks very young to be 32, but she's not a girl. Like, even if she's like in her early 20s, even in the 60s, I don't know. I feel like calling her the girl is just fucking creepy. Anyway, then the aliens appear, and they're fucking creepy. They're actually creepy. Those fucking veins. I have no idea how they did that, but they're like, it's like, the fucking veins they have. It's like incredibly creepy. And they stun Pike with an orange, like, I don't know what's that? It's like a smoke stick. It has like glowing orange smoke coming out of it, and then he's stunned, and they just kidnap him. Sorry. They come up this elevator, and then they fucking kidnap him. It's like really weird. So, I do like that elevator. It's a pretty cool set, though. Right, so they figure out it's all been an illusion. They just wanted to kidnap the captain. Then they start blasting the door of the elevator with phasers. I'm sorry, lasers, because apparently they're lasers at this point. We don't have phasers yet. I kind of like how that laser looks. I like that more than I think they designed the TOS phasers specifically so they wouldn't look as much like pistols, like actual weapons. But I like this look. I like the way you twist it and stuff. It's pretty cool. Right, and then we have Pike. We go back to Pike, who's now captured in some... It's like a plexiglass cage. I actually like that simplicity of that. What I don't like is the fucking other animals. Like, what is that? Is that like a killer chicken? Is that supposed to be like... Apparently they had this costume over from some other movie. NBC film. But I don't... Daisy Lou, I don't know who the fuck... Like, what the fuck is that? That looks like something out of Birdemic. It's like... It's really bad. The aliens, though, the Telosians I really like. Although there are a bunch of arseheads. Like, I don't want to be xenophobic here, speaking Star Trek, but like the opposite side of the head just looks like a butt. Yeah, so Pike doesn't like being in that cage, obviously. He's like, fucking, this is... I don't like this. He announces himself as being from a stellar group at the other end of the galaxy, which is completely like wrong. That's an example of, they don't have they don't know where they are in the galaxy at this point. They don't have anything mapped out. They don't know how big the galaxy is. Like, Roddenberry hasn't thought about that much, I think. Because the other end of the galaxy would be presumably, Earth is, it would presumably be like the Delta Quadrant or the Gamma Quadrant, and they can't be there. And later on, we learn that Talos is actually obviously in the Alpha Quadrant, so I don't know. We'll just ignore that line, I guess. I told you I was going to nitpick, right? That's my whole thing. That's what this is all about. This is also why I need to drink so much. Well, fucking. And with some episodes later on, I'm going to have to drink something stronger because there's some bloody horrible Star Trek episodes. I don't know what I need to do once we get to the modern Star Trek, if I ever get there. And that's going to probably require hard drugs. Yeah, so we're going to have to ignore that. So apparently the radio waves were a scam. By the way, the fucking veins. I just wrote that down several times. It's just the fucking veins are just amazing. I don't know how they did that. It looks like it's water. Maybe it's air. Maybe they're pumping air under that, and they have like a thing under their arm where they go, and then I don't know how they do that, but it's fucking amazing. So then they talk to him in telepathy, and Pike figures that out, and he somehow says, so they can read his thoughts, and he can read theirs. Also, that doesn't make any sense, I think. Like, why would he be able to read their thoughts? Also, they then demonstrate that they can read his thoughts and say what he will do next because he's a primitive person. But they say it out, well, not out loud, but he hears it. But he still does it. They're like, he's gonna show his like masculine like strength or something because he's frustrated, and then he stops and then he does it anyway. I don't think that scene works. No, I don't think this works at all. Right, we're back on the Enterprise now. The planet looks different now because apparently that was also an illusion. Makes sense. What I don't understand is how does the Doctor know now that they can read their minds? Like, he talks about how the illusion and they can read their minds and that they can read like stuff in their minds and then create illusions based on that. How does he know that? I mean, yes, they saw it was an illusion down there, whatever, like, but like the rest, that doesn't work. Like he does, I don't know how he has that knowledge. I'm not even sure Pike has that knowledge at this point. And he's down there talking to these, brain talking, brocking, braining. I have no idea. So in this scene where they're on the Enterprise in the meeting room, they you can actually tell, like they cut back and forth, and you can tell the difference, like in the audio track, where there's like stuff that they didn't use in the menagerie, and they have to take like the working print audio cut. It's like really noticeable in that scene. And then Spock talks about how these guys have like really big brains, and he shows this on screen. Did Spock draw this by hand? I mean, pretty good if he did, but it's like they put no thoughts into these computer graphics, I feel. It's like the printer. Like, what the fuck? And like this, I mean, yeah, we're in the 60s, but like even in the 60s, it's like it doesn't jibe with the rest of the set, right? With how futuristic everything, like futuristic for the 60s, everything looks. And then you get this. It seems like this seems lazy to me, or that they ran out of money or whatever, or they couldn't do it any better. Didn't have any people could do it. I have no idea, but somebody apparently just drew this by hand and they put that on screen. Spock also talks very un-Spock, un-Vulcan. At one point, he literally says, "If we start buzzing about down there," that's not a way to talk. And in this scene, you can really tell how number one is the cool and logical one. She has already establishes the Starfleet tradition of, getting your people together. You have a problem, you get your people together, and then you listen to. This is basic, by the way, what they don't do in like new Star Trek, like Discovery or anything like that. They never do that. In traditional Star Trek, you're the commanding officer, and you get your people together, and then you listen to their opinions, and then you make your own decision. And she actually goes against Spock in this, because Spock says we shouldn't do anything down there. They're much more intelligent than us. We're going to, whatever, we're going to lose. And she's like, no, she goes with the young ops guy's recommendation of just blasting through. Apparently they can put like a laser down on the planet and transfer the power of the Enterprise down, which they never do later in Star Trek. I actually found this interesting. Anyway, so they do that. One side, what the fuck is number one's name? Why? I mean, number one, the nickname, cool. They recycle that in Next Generation, obviously. But Riker's name. At some point, somebody should say a name. That's just weird. Back down on the planet, the Telosian talks to Pike and mentions that apparently thousands of Telosians are analyzing him at this very moment, which is creepy and weird. Then he has an illusion, and we are on Rider 7 now. This is the matte painting, which is amazing. It's actually one of the most famous matte paintings in all of Star Trek. I think it gets reused as like paintings, or like doesn't some captain have this in his ready room or something? I don't know. But like, this is a very famous picture, and it's amazing. It's like old school, this is like a cover from an old school science fiction magazine. And it actually looks quite photorealistic. Some later matte paintings, back even towards like Deep Space Nine, sometimes like so I'm not a good artist, but I did some art in school, and you can tell when the perspective doesn't work, especially with buildings. In this case, it works. This looks actually amazing. It's an amazing picture, very famous as well. Now we get some really bad acting. The actress who plays Vina is horrible in this scene. Horrible. She is atrocious. This is some fucking The Room level acting, right? She's like, come on, we must hide ourselves. Oh, that sounds like Bob Dylan, actually. But she's come on. She's like also very high pitched. I don't know. Is she acting? Does she know what's going on? I don't understand this. Watched this several times. I don't know if she's mind controlled by the Telosians, if she actually knows what's going on. If she's just, because she's been living with them for 18 years, she's just like mad. I've got no idea. But like, this is a screen grab, and it's not even. You know how you can do screen grabs and they don't really. depict, like they look really shit, but like you watch the scene and it doesn't, it's just like you can for everybody you can get a screen, you can make a screen of this video and make me look horrible, but like this is actually on screen. I think she looks like that for a second, just like nah! And then she pulls herself free and runs towards the gate, and yeah. It's not good acting. Now, Pike sees through the illusion. She liked this. I don't know if this was actually filmed outside. It looks like it was filmed outside. It looks pretty cool. But Pike, there's a ridiculous warrior guy, and he wants to fight Pike. And Pike sees through the illusion, but like this is one of the scenes that doesn't make any sense to me as well, because he sees through the illusion, but then fights the imaginary monster man anyway, because apparently we need to have a gladiator scene, because gladiator movies are really, in the 60s. I don't know. The monster dude is really stupid. He looks like the metal tooth guy from James Bond, actually. Jaws. I like how he like dies by jumping. He wants to attack Pike. He jumps down from like an upper area, and Pike has gotten the top piece of a pike and impales him with it. Pike impales him with a pike. It's kind of funny, though. I kind of enjoy that. And then we have some horrible dialogue. Like he goes like, "Why are you here? To please you. Are you real? As real as you wish." It's like, this is like, this is bad porn dialogue. They're back in the cell. He realized it was an illusion. He talks about what she's wearing and that she's not real. And she's like, I have to wear something, right? Why does she have to wear... because it's television, right? But why does she have to wear something? Because isn't the point that they want Pike to throw himself on her and start fucking right away? Like, why is she even wearing things? And why is she wearing that much? Because the Telosians don't really understand Pike, I guess. I like how he's like then he's then like saying, or do they do more than watch me? Do they? Right? And yeah, mate, they're fapping. They're fapping while, or brain fapping probably, because Telosians don't do anything real anymore. Meanwhile, number one's like, we're going to transfer the power of the Enterprise, and they bring out the fucking huge laser, which is amazing. They should have done that more during the, like, Kirk should have done this. I feel like we're going to talk about this later when we talk about TOS episodes. I feel I might be bringing this up if I remember. I'm like, why don't they solve this situation with the fucking huge laser? I like the Wehrmacht style desert warfare goggles, like the Rommel goggles. Pretty cool. Majel Barrett is amazing in this. I think it's by far her best Star Trek performance, aside from the computer voice. Computer voice is her best acting, but she's amazing in this. She's really good. Like, she commands the screen. It's I know this because of the story, but it's a shame that the shitty actor who plays Vina, well, she's actually not that bad, but in some scenes she's pretty bad. Majel Barrett is much better. Like, she sometimes, I think, gets the stigma attached to her that, Gene Roddenberry just cast her in shit because he married her later and really liked her. But she's actually in this, she's legitimately a good actress. She's really good. Yeah, I do like that. I love her. I love her nail varnish, by the way. It's got this blue sparkly nail varnish that completely fits with her uniform jacket. It's like really good. They tried to blast the door. They don't get through. Like, tried with hand lasers. Now they have the big laser. It doesn't work. Spock actually says they have to stop because otherwise the ship will blow itself up. And he uses the words, quote, "we'll have to seize power." Seize power? I don't think this is how English works. I'm not a native speaker. Did study the language for a while. Been speaking it for a fucking long time. I don't think seize power And even if it's correct English, it doesn't sound like something Spock would say. Obviously, I didn't do anything to the fucking door. Apparently, there's now water running down the rock face. I don't know why. They just heated the fucking thing up and it was nice. So I don't know why there's no water running down. And why is there even water on the set? This is a sound state. I don't know where that water is weird to me. Why is there water? This doesn't look like a planet that has a lot of water. Because apparently it was all nuked and it was a war thousands of centuries ago. So that's thousands of hundreds of years. So that's tens of thousands of years. That must have been a fucking massive war that the planet hasn't recovered in like 20,000 years. I mean, if we fucking nuked everything and right now, I mean, sometimes it feels like we're close to it, I know, right now. But, I think 10,000 years later, like, I mean, we'd all be dead. But, like, there's something, I mean, the cockroaches or whatever, the turtles would probably still be there. I don't know. That must have been one hell of a war. Yeah. So we're back in the cell. I like the uniform. Interestingly enough, there's a zipper there. So apparently you open this here. Not like the DS9 style uniforms which open in the front. I mean, those are jackets, like the later TNG uniforms. The first TNG uniforms are a jumpsuit, like this. By the way, thanks to my mom who made this uniform for me. She's amazing. The TNG, the first season ones have a zipper in the back. Now, this is a turtleneck. Turtlenecks don't have zippers, and you can just take that off. I don't know why there's a zipper here. Probably just make it easier to put on with makeup or something. I don't know, but I thought that was weird as a nitpick for me. It's just weird. This is another one of the looks. It's not as good as a I don't know, at the beginning. I feel like she's actually quite good acting in the beginning and towards the end of the episode, but it's kind of like in the middle it's falling apart. I don't know in what sequence they filmed this, so it might have been anything. But like, there are scenes where she's not a good actress. So we learn that the Telosians are a really advanced race, and then they turned into gamers. I think kind of idiocracy. They just started using VR, didn't move anymore, because they figured out they could do everything with their brains, and then they just did everything with their brains, just illusions that it completely deteriorated, and then they couldn't even fucking. Well, first off, they had a war. They had that war, wiped everything out, and then they had to live underground. And then they turned into gamers because they couldn't go outside anymore, so they just played World of Warcraft all day and got fucking. And they do everything with illusions. Turns out then you don't have to do anything anymore. You don't have to live life anymore. It's kind of idiocracy. And they lost everything. Like they can't even like repair the machines the ancestors left them. But apparently they just concentrated on using their mental power because, they wanted illusions because they did everything with their brain now. And then their brain got bigger. I don't think that's how evolution works. That's not really evolutionary pressure. Also, I think that would take a lot longer. But, I mean, thousands of centuries, maybe. But anyway, bottom line, they turned into total gamers. Now they apparently want Pike and Vina to breed so that they can have a slave race or something. So she says, we're like Adam and Eve. Boom chakawawa. It's breeding time. But, doesn't Pike doesn't want to. Then she gets mind punished. And like Susan Oliver, the actress, this is bad. Like she can't do it. Like Kirk when he's got like brain pain and he's rolling around. It's like Shatner's really bad at this. She's even worse. Like that's like the worst fake orgasm in a porn movie. It's horrible. It's not good. One thing I noticed. Speaking of the pants, the uniform pants are very tight. You can see Hunter's ass a lot of time. You can fucking see his underwear. It's that tight. It's yeah. Well, got to give the lady something to see as well. But yeah. Now we get into like really what the fuck, like. Now we get into the thing that mostly doesn't work for me. Like there's this door in the cage where they put like the food in, right? And they have to put it through a door. Like Pike tries to break out and he's like, is there any crack? And then the door opens and he's like, oh my, I gotta get there. And then they close it over really quickly and then the food thing's there, which is apparently protein. There's no way that's protein. It's like a clear liquid. There's no way that's protein. Anyway, he doesn't behave. Obviously, now he gets punished with a fable from his childhood. Now he does the Kirk. I'm hurt. Like, okay, let's be fair. Jeffrey Hunter isn't much better doing this than Susan Oliver. So he's pretty shit at this. Also, what kind of fable is this? Hellfire and porridge? Like, this is actually filmed quite well. This is like real fire, obviously not where he is. And he's standing in frozen nitrogen, so he's not hot. But like, there's like stuff on his uniform, and it looks like it's porridge. I don't know what that fable is. The porridge and hellfire fable. Don't know. Anyway, we're now then. Okay, this is the stick. Then we get the carrot. He gets his wish. Relax time. They're now in Mojave. This is a horrible set. The matte painting is ridiculous. The grass looks like shit. I mean, they got real horses. Also, he's wearing jeans, apparently. It looks like he's wearing jeans. Also very tight. You can see his ass. That's good. Scene's pretty cringy. Apparently, she made his mother's chicken tuna sandwich. What the hell is chicken tuna? Is that a thing? Is that like a cross between a chicken? Or do they just put chicken and tuna on a sandwich? What the fuck is that? Like, even in the future, that's an abomination. Then actually you get the line, that he talks about the prison. He's in a zoo, basically. He says, a menagerie, a cage. Got both episode titles in there, so that's pretty neat. Yeah, and then he's like really down. It's like he actually says, they own me, which actually that's pretty grim. I mean, I like that theme with like, really advanced aliens putting like humans in a zoo. And you watch this like in the 60s, and they're like, it must be really scary because they're really advanced, right, on the Enterprise, Starfleet, which you don't know it's called Starfleet yet, but all right. They're pretty advanced. And then there are these aliens who are even more advanced, and they just put you in a zoo. It's fucking, I think that's fucking scary. And they're like, I mean, intimidating small guys with veiny ass heads, but like they're really, I don't know, it's creepy. It's creepy. Anyway, we get that illusion doesn't work. Pike doesn't want to bone her. So now we go to the Orion slave fantasy. His other fantasy. He wanted to be an Orion slave trader. We now have Vina as an Orion slave girl. This is the first time we have green. Yeah, this is the first Star Trek episode. We get Orions. We get green animal women. She does of course, this is slave. So it's like a backwater culture. So of course, everything has to be Oriental. This is where this is where it's not very progressive, and the 60s kind of political playing field of the 60s kind of comes through. Oriental music, she's doing like Oriental belly dancing, and overtly, here's the overt eroticism that we get. And it kind of speaks for itself. It's kind of a fun scene. So the set's very simplistic, as you can see. But it's like green animal women. Aside, she actually, because they were filming that and it was hot and she was all body painted green, she actually lost consciousness, I think, at some point on the set. So they called a doctor in, right? So they call this doctor in who freaks out because they say, okay, this woman fainted. Can you give her something? And he just fucking freaked out because she was green. Like, he didn't understand that he was on a television set. And, that's a pretty fun story. In the 60s, you still had that. And he took apparently 20 minutes to give her an injection because he fucking couldn't concentrate. Because he had to wrap his mind around that he was treating a green woman. Right. Then we have transporter room scene. Spock and the others are trying to beam down. okay, so your captain's been captured, right? And there's an advanced race and they're fucking with you. And now you're beaming down your second and your third officer? Like, if they capture those guys, who's going to be in command? That 16-year-old yeoman? And then, I think one of the things that actually Roddenberry had down, he didn't have the whole, where in the universe are we, what is Starfleet, what's the Federation? He didn't have that down, the organizational structure. One thing I think he had down is like a starship, a military starship, which this is. I mean, at one point they say, we can like blow up half a continent with our weapons. So obviously it makes sense that they're like a military organization. They have uniforms. They're very strict, and I think that works. I mean, he's got that down. But there's some weird moments like this when they're beaming down. Spock's very Spockish in this scene, though. I kind of like that. Anyway, they beam down. Only they want to transport the whole away team down, and only the two women actually dematerialize. To which, when Spock notices, she says, "The women," which is amazing. So we're now down in the cell. Now the Pike has a foursome going, which is pretty amazing. The first thing Pike does is the 16-year-old yeoman, he rips open her uniform because he wants to get at the laser she's carrying. But it's like, okay, that's him, me too. Then, like, he didn't ask her, like, for consent before he just ripped open her uniform tunic. And I mean, everybody's thinking he's just gonna fuck her right there and then, because just look at Vina in the background. I love that. Just look at that look. She's obviously really annoyed because now, they transported two other women down because, Pike doesn't want to breed with her. So I thought that was kind of cool. There's some bad, I can't make a signal. I think number one, that's like really bad writing. She's really good though. Like, Vina goes like, you don't need these women, and number one, in a very analytical way, immediately goes after her with her real age. She's like, there was like an adult Vina listed on this expedition for this ship that crashed. So that was 18 years ago. So your real age is, and then they get interrupted by the Telosians. But I think that's amazing. Also figure out that she's not Spock. She actually, kind of like Spock, but like she has emotions like a Vulcan, I guess. She's just hiding them. So she is like a Vulcan. I like how they say about this 16-year-old looking actress. She has, quote, the Telosian keeper says she has unusually strong female drives. It's pretty explicit for 1960s TV. Holy shit. And then we get the first facepalm in Star Trek, which is actually Vina. And it's a pretty good one. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to use that on social media. That's a pretty good facepalm. It's like, fuck this. We then have a scene where the keeper leaves, goes on an elevator, and then we have a cut and he comes right back. I didn't understand that at all. Again, we're now back at the ship. Spock's kind of like, we have to leave now. But the ship isn't really working. He wants, again, to address intercraft. Then he says, switch to rockets. We're blasting out. Holy shit, this is 60 rockets. I think he means thrusters. Also, we are blasting out. Interesting. And then back in the cell, Pike actually uses that fucking door because they're very advanced, but I guess they've forgotten everything. They can't teleport anything down, so they have to have an actual door. And Pike figures out that the lasers don't work, so he puts them next to the door because I think he wants to bait those guys. So the keeper actually, when they're all asleep, Pike just pretends to be asleep. He goes to the door and pulls the fucking keeper through the door. That's pretty stupid. Like, what the fuck is their this fucking advanced race, and they go through all this door. This is like their OPSEC. This is their fucking security for the cell. They don't even have a force field. Like, what the fuck's is that's just bad. That doesn't work for me at all. Like this door, this whole scene where he pulls him through the door. This is the dumbest shit ever. This is really dumb. Meanwhile, in orbit, Spock has taken the fucking Enterprise apart completely to find out why it doesn't work. Of course, that's just an illusion, but like, I don't know. Spock's not very logical at this point. He doesn't figure that out. In this process, we learn that they have tapes and micro records, which I guess is microfiche. I don't know. Pike then figures out that the lasers actually do work, and he shoots at the plexiglass, and that the fact that he can't see that there's a hole there is just an illusion, threatens to kill the keeper by strangling him or shoot his head off. And then he actually shows him the hole in the plexiglass, which is this is actually good. That was an actual plexiglass wall, and they fucking just cut a hole in it and then burnt the edges. It looked like they fucking actually burnt the plexiglass. It's pretty amazing. Then we have the scene where Pike tries to go into the elevator and where he's way too tall. Also, when they're up again, I like how this whole place, they now show, like, without the illusion that, like, same thing above ground, number one actually fucking blasted the rock face. Probably the first second they used the powerful laser, but they didn't notice. So that's actually pretty cool. And number one actually also figures that out. She's pretty badass. I like her, and I like these lasers or lasers. Sorry. Again, her nail varnish is pretty awesome. I mean, she's very low key with her makeup. Major Barrett in this, especially if you know her later, is fucking Loxana Troy. But like that nail polish is fucking amazing. That's one of my favorite things about this whole episode. Also fits the plants on the planet. She's like, she did some research before beaming down. She's like, the only thing I really do to indulge myself is nail polish. That needs to be on point. It is. It also fits her uniform jacket amazingly well. We don't have that later in Star Trek. I regret that. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay, then we got the resolution. The keeper actually, they downloaded the whole microfiche library on the Enterprise, and they now figure out that humans apparently have a unique hatred of captivity. So that's one thing I don't buy. But maybe they're just these really advanced aliens that really don't know anything about the universe, which would make sense, or the galaxy, because they're fucking gamers and they've been stuck in the basement for like hundreds of thousands of years, playing, watching VR porn and wanking and playing like World of Warcraft. So they know nothing about but because you'd think like reacting negatively to captivity would be pretty universal among any sentient being. I just remind you of the episode where Picard gets abducted and put into the cell, and he's there with like 3 other people, and they're all like different. There's like a Starfleet cadet. There's like this. I don't know. None of them reacts well to captivity. Let's put it that way. And then they say, well, we just wanted, this is like, even you react negatively even to pleasant and benevolent captivity. Dudes, there's no such thing as pleasant and benevolent captivity. Just doesn't exist. Like, what the fuck? And why didn't they figure all of this out? Like, why do they need the Enterprise computer for this? Vina was there for 18 years. They could have just talked to her. Or like scanned her brain with their brain powers. Some plot points. I mean, generally, I think the episode works, but some doesn't work. They beam them back one at a time. I don't understand why that happens. They beamed several people before. Maybe they're really careful now with the transporter, because last time they only beamed the women. I don't know. How did that? Was that an illusion? Like some of the stuff, if it's only an illusion, why do they actually? I think the transporter chief probably pushed the wrong buttons, and he was thinking he was pushing other buttons, probably. Yeah. I also like how baffled the transporter chief is most of that. That's pretty cool. I wrote down, what a plank. I like the Frankenstein transformation scene with Vina going like old and ugly, like, That must have taken ages to film. Works really well though, I think. Like even today, holds up quite well, actually. Now you could CGI it, but I think that's even like almost better looking than most CGI. It's like really well done. I mean those Telosians, they put her back together. They didn't know what a human looked like. She was injured in the crash, and they put her back together. Now she's ugly, old and ugly, and that's why they gave her an illusion of youth. I think they did an admirable job for not having, like, for being gamers and being stuck in their basement and not having seen a human before. I think they did quite a good job. Anyway, we now have the resolution. Basically, Pike beams back up, and he's. They just wanted to show her where Vina really doesn't want to leave because, you know, she'd be ugly and fuck. And down there, she's happy. And the Telosians actually give her an imagine Pike, like illusion Pike, because they can do that now because he's now in her brain because she met him and she loves him. And so Pike, the Enterprise crew, gets to go. They just leave Telos 4 alone, and she lives down there. And, you know, okay, the gamer race is doomed, but I think they kind of accepted this now. Also, where did they get the other animals from? They said they got it from all over the galaxy. How did they, like, did they lure them there with, like, did they lure the weird beard there with radio waves? I think probably back in the day, a few thousand years ago, they actually could fly around or whatever, because they still knew more about technology and got out of the basement once in a while. Who knows? It's just... anyway, so they're back on the Enterprise. Everybody's happy. He runs into the yeoman again. She hands him more stationery. I like their interaction, though. I do like these two characters, even though the Telosians got her to, like, you know, they said she has unusually strong female drives, and this gets mentioned again, I think. Or maybe I just wrote that down. Yeah, so this was just my comment. Unusually strong female drives. Ha ha. She looks like she's fucking 16. Also, what's up with the uniforms? They don't have the color down at all, as you can see in this picture. It's kind of like Kirk's. I mean, I think that was on purpose. Kirk's uniform, which is kind of like green, and then there's yellow ones. I've actually read that the uniform that looks yellow for him, like the gold uniform, was actually green. And it's just the way, like, the color of the film worked back then. But I don't know. But you see the guy in the background, and her uniform has a different color. And she has a different uniform. She has a different neckline as well. And so the female uniform. But, like, the guy in the back has the same uniform as Pike. But they're different. That's all over the place. I do like that yeoman. She's adorable. And she does have some spunk, as she shows down on the planet. She's pretty cool. I like her. I have to say, though, my favorite character by far in this is number 1. Also, best acting in this episode. Pike again says engage. So that is the traditional thing to say when you go to warp. Is engage. And at the end, you see this ship again flying off. I gotta say, they didn't use that ship model much. I mean, they built that fucking ship model, and that was huge, right? It's huge. It's like 1.50 meters long or something. That must have been a lot of work just for the pilot, and a lot of money. And they don't use it much. They don't show it much. You know, they don't have the traditional shot of the Enterprise in orbit around the planet. Maybe they couldn't get that done or whatever. But the compositing is a bit off, like in the beginning as well. You can see, like, the star field through the ship. That's it for the cage. In general, I really like this episode. I mean, there's obviously still some stuff that didn't work. They're still finding their feet. You know, some of the organizational stuff. Where we are in the galaxy, what's going on with, where's Earth? Where's Telos 4? That doesn't really work. But, they're still finding their feet. I think this is an hour long, but it seems a lot slower paced than the later episode, like TOS in general, most of the episodes. So maybe that's also a problem they had. Maybe that's something Ron Berry learned, that he needs more. I wouldn't even actually say action, because in later TOS it's not specifically action, but it's faster paced. It's cut more aggressively, I feel. Yeah. As a, if you look at this in a like total Star Trek nerd lore sense, I mean, they did severely fuck up future continuity if you take, this is obviously canon, and if you take everything as they say for granted, then there's some stuff you just can't retcon and you can't reconcile with later lore, the light barrier and stuff like that. But I guess, that's expected. I mean, this is really, really groundbreaking television back in the day. I can't even imagine what, like, if you, as I said, I'm born in the 80s, so I don't know what television looked like in the 60s, but you read accounts of people who are like, I saw this on TV when I was young in the 60s, and it was like, what the fuck? This is literally like a whole level of, it's not even like entertain. It doesn't feel like TV anymore. It just feels like amazingly real and sophisticated and stuff. And you can see that shine through. The sets are pretty good in places. In some places they look better than the TOS sets, especially the planet. Obviously they had more money. Some of the stuff though is like really backwards. Then like they've got like paper and printers and fucking flipboards, fucking people running around the clipboards. It's just annoying. Yeah, I mean, they kind of, I think the only thing Roddenberry kept here was like the bridge set, the meeting room set. I think that's the only sets they kept. And obviously Spock, they obviously kept Spock. I kind of like Pike. Kind of miss Pike. I think the show would have been a different show with Pike as a character instead of Shatner. But I think Roddenberry probably realized that one of the problems with this, why NBC didn't like this pilot, was the character of Pike. That it wasn't interesting enough, I feel. Maybe a bit cold. So, Kirk is obviously different. But I feel like, I don't know, Hunter might have been generally a better actor than Shatner. Shatner is famous for overacting, and we'll get into that when we watch proper TOS episodes. Yeah. And I'm really sad we got Nurse Chapel, Metal Barrett playing Nurse Chapel later on in the series instead of Number One, because I really like Number One. I think that's an amazing character. I think that is her acting as the peak of her Star Trek acting performance, at least on screen. The computer voice will be unreached for me as any computer voice in any medium ever. She's so excellent in that, doing that computer voice and, putting her specific twist on that. It being unemotional but still sarcastic is pretty cool. Yeah, that's the Cage. That is the first episode of Star Trek, the original series, I guess. The pilot that was aired until later, but still, I consider it the, it's classic Star Trek. It's set in the chronology. Obviously, it's the first event that happens. And, we'll basically rewatch it again later when we watch the Menagerie. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at the Cage and at Star Trek. And I'll see you for the next episode. Until then, live long and prosper.